This is your war game for fighting First World War skirmish kind of aerial combats. Here what you will get is a game where all the things that you need to play, the counters, the rule sets, the maps, the scenarios, everything is there in one set of PDF or paperback. In fact, you have even options to play a campaign as well. Whatever you need to play is already there. Now, Knights of the Air is designed to be simple to play and yet entertaining and enjoyable. You will have missions to do based on the scenarios that are there. Maps are included for you to play along with it. Now, how does the game go? I would go do a run through of the basic things such as turn sequence, units and terrain, movement, combat, and also look at a simple or rather a sample play of a scenario. And I hope that would get you give you a gist of what the game is all about. Now, turn sequence. As I said, it's a simple I go, you go kind of a game. So every turn, uh, there are two phases. One is for the movement called the flight, and the second that is for the combat. Now, a scenario would specify who would go first. Uh, in this game, always it's the attackers who go first, and followed by the defenders. Now, the scenario will specify who will be the attacker and who will be the defender. Now, a turn sequence for a two-player game would be like player A or the attacker moving all his units one by one. Then, if there is any scope for combat, then you'd resolve the combat. Then the next player, that's the player D, will move and then check for combat. Similarly, if you're playing a four-player game, you may have two players in the attacking team and two players on the defending, or maybe two players in the attacking and one player in the defending, whichever way it is, you follow the same sequence. Now, units and terrain. Let's look at units. There are three kinds of units in this game: fighters, bombers, and airships. Now, fighters are primarily useful and effective for air combat. They are more agile and they are faster. Now, bombers and airships, they are not as fast, not as agile, and not as effective in aerial combat, but they are quite effective for ground combat. Now, how to have the combat and those things, some of those details you can find in the rules, but just to help you understand, uh, fighters shoot one hex in front of them. Bombers can shoot in all directions, but not as effectively, whereas they can bomb one hex in front of them. So ground attack would be always at a target that is one hex in front of them. Similarly for the airships. Now, terrain, there are some terrain features that's important. One is cloud. Now, on the map, there will be certain hexes which are marked in white or very light gray. And those represent clouds. Now, if your aircraft is in a cloud hex, you cannot be shot. Neither can you shoot. Similarly, there are hexes which are marked in a little lightish red. Those are basically hexes which have anti-air defense. They could be key military installations or just simple AAD positions. Whenever an aircraft passes uh, through a hex which is adjacent to a AAD hex or an AAD hex, after the movement finishes, the defending player, and a defending player owns all the AAD hex in this game. They can roll to see if there is any damage. Now, there may be in certain scenarios certain hexes which are bound by a red border. Now, those are mission critical targets in that particular scenario. You may have to maybe bomb that target or maybe do a reconnaissance over that target. But these are the key terrains which impact the game. Then there are others which are just there for aesthetic reasons. Now, movement. Every aircraft in this game has a movement rating, and that kind of determines what are the things that that aircraft can do. You can do a certain number of uh, heading changes, or you can maybe move a certain number of hexes. Remember, fighters are more agile. So now we replicate that by having a maximum heading change value. fighters can change a maximum of three headings. A heading basically is in this game, it aircraft always point to one particular edge or side of a hex. Shifting either to the left or right of that is one heading change. Basically, fighter can do three of that in one particular move. Bombers can do two, and airships can do one. Now the example, now let's look at an example that is there. On your right, you have a small hex grid with m is equal to 4. So basically, it's a fighter. It has a movement rating of 4. So it will move. And we'll basically have one movement, but it will be broken down into four parts to help you understand how it functions. Now it just moved straight ahead. So it has spent one movement rating. Now it has turned to the right. So it has spent another movement rating. It went ahead again. So one more movement rating. And now it turned. So another movement rating was spent. So now that's all the movement that this particular aircraft could have done in this particular move. Now, if there was an aircraft right in front of its nose, within one hex, it could have engaged in combat. In this case, no such thing is there, so no combat. And then maybe the next uh, team or the next player can take up his or her turn. An example of combat over here. Remember, two things are important. One is range, that is one hex in front, uh, and the firing arc. For fighter aircrafts, is always straight ahead to their nose. Now, imagine in this situation, it's the uh, central powers that are the active player, or that is the active player. In that case, now they are represented by the gray hexed aircraft. Now, you will see that they have one allied aircraft right in front of them. Now, two central aircraft have one allied aircraft in front of them, and both of them can engage in combat one by one. Now, one of them is face to face with an allied aircraft. In that case, something happens, and that's called a reactive fire. So, while resolving the combat, you have to keep in mind, because the allied aircraft can also shoot back. So you have the central aircraft which can shoot at the allied aircraft, but then the allied aircraft can also react. So when you resolve combat, you have to keep both of those things in mind. And then you also have another central aircraft which can shoot at the same target. Now, if you look at the map, then you will see that there's another allied aircraft, but it cannot engage in any kind of combat because, firstly, it's not its turn. Secondly, even if it was its turn, it has no one within its firing range. Now, this is an example of a scenario. If you have the paper back, then on one side, that's the left side, you'll have the scenario. On the right side, you will be having the map, and you can actually play right from it. The scenario page will have all the details that you require: the unit characteristics, the terrain features, what are the victory conditions for both the teams, and if there's any special notes, those things will also be included. On the map, you will have whatever is the targeted areas or the mission critical hexes that you need to cover those. It will also have the starting points from where you start. In certain maps, they may have exit points. Certain maps may have some routes to follow. All of those things would be there. Now let's do a sample play. So we'll focus on a particular region in this particular map. All the aircrafts are placed in the starting points. In this particular game, it's the allied player who's the attacker. So the allied players will start first. And let's see how they move. So we have NP1 moving 3 hexes. So remember, M is equal to 4, so it has one more move it can do one more thing. So it chooses to turn the hex. M is equal to 0 now. That particular aircraft has finished its all movement. Now there's another allied aircraft. Let's see what it does. It chooses to cover 4 hexes in one straight move, and it can do nothing else now. Now allied player has finished his movement phase, but then it cannot engage in combat because nothing is in his range. So the central powers team will now be the active player. So you can see straight away uh, the central powers team, the first aircraft changed its heading, then moved straight ahead, and then again changed its heading to face the opposition aircraft. Another aircraft just chose to fly straight towards to get into the melee, and then the third aircraft moved for 3 hexes and then changes the heading. So here in terms of combat, we have definitely uh, one of the aircrafts facing and engaging in combat. The allied aircraft cannot engage back because it is not in its firing arc. Now for combat, what you do is you roll d6. Fighters will roll 3d6 and 5 and 6s are a hit. Anytime you collect 3 hits on a particular aircraft, that aircraft is lost. So for the sake of an example, let's say at this combat, the central powers player put a 3 hit on the allied aircraft and it is lost. Now it's turn 2 and the remaining aircraft which is earmarked for reconnaissance, it comes to the target and it will recognize and it will do the surveillance or it will take the photo reconnaissance. But at the same time, because it's a key military installation, it will also face anti-aircraft defense. In terms of turn 2, the central powers players will now kind of go for the kill. Now you can clearly see what's going to happen. Things are heating up. Now, what happens next? To know such things, you will have to play by yourself. You can play it alone or you can play with friends, but now where will you get it? You'll get the PDF on Wargames World, whereas if you want the paperback, you can check out Amazon. Links for both will be given in the description. Happy playing.